Joining me in the Catalyst studio today for my mayor is candidate Robert Blackmon. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
So how's life on the campaign trail?
Action-packed, always something every day. It's exciting. Phone calls, events, talking to people, speaking engagements, but having a great time, getting a lot of good feedback.
That's great. All right, so today we're trying to get our head around the Trop and the redevelopments, understanding the historical context, understanding some of the current day wranglings, and obviously what our North Star is that we're walking to with that whole redevelopment. Um, let's start with what do you think we need to know about the past with regard to the Trop?
So Tropicana Field, I think a lot of people now, especially over the last few years, as we've talked about it publicly in council meetings and the media, knows about the past of the gas plant district. And just a quick overview, the land where Tropicana Field currently sits and where the whole site is was a historic African-American community in the city. And it was an important community in the city. There was a lot of churches, a lot of businesses. It was on the boundary of Peppertown. And, going through old research articles, there was a lot of different struggles for years with that community. And there's been, for years debate as to, how we can better, integrate that site with the rest of the city. That being said, in the 1970s, there was a plan discussed to potentially tear down that whole community due to the blight that was claimed by the city leaders at the time, which was ultimately done in the 80s. The site was cleared, everyone was displaced and moved out, and the Suncoast Dome, as Tropicana Field was originally called, was built. But as we need to have a good historical frame of reference for what Tropicana Field site was and how the gas plant district was there, another thing we need to think about is how we built a dome with no plan in place. So that's kind of my 2 cents I want to throw in on this today is the dome was built in the 1980s with high hopes. So we built that dome hoping we could attract a baseball stadium, even though we had none on the horizon. We had the Oakland A's, the Chicago White Sox, a number of other teams were talking about coming there, but we were never ultimately able to attract a team. And an interesting article that I mentioned in council recently that I came across was in 1991, there was an editorial out of the Orlando Sentinel talking about how at a council meeting, the city council voted to have a large indoor garage sale at the Tropicana Field site, at the Suncoast Dome, which had been completed, yet had no tenant. And we're talking, 5 years after, 6 years after this had all started, there was still no tenant. And at the time, Councilmember Yingst and Councilmember Bond and Vice Mayor Connie Cohn, a friend of mine, said, of course this isn't ideal, but what are we going to do? We got to pay the bills. We got to keep the lights on. We got to make some kind of income because it was operating at such a massive loss. And Orlando Sentinel was saying, hey, St. Pete's the laughing stock of the region due to the fact that they have a huge albatross of a stadium with nothing to do there. And that's kind of what I want people to think about and remember as we move forward in this next step of what to do with the Tropicana Field site and redevelopment. We rushed things originally. We were in such a hurry to get everyone cleared out from their historic neighborhood where they had lived for generations, to knock down the homes and then build the stadium because we were so certain we were going to have such a demand for it. And 5, 6, 10 years later, there was nothing. And we were having garage sales in what was supposed to be a state-of-the-art, world-class athletic stadium. And it was ultimately not until 1998 when we found a full-time tenant in the Tampa Bay Rays.
So when you talk about rushing, you use the example of people had this vision and they took a pretty big step to try to get that vision. Ultimately, that vision did come true, but quite a while later, and a lot of lost years in there, and a lot of lost money in there. So when you look at when you apply the word rush to our current day situation, can you dig a little bit more into what you mean specifically by "don't rush"?
Well, one other thing I will throw out is we did have in the stadium in those intermediary years. We had the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Tampa Bay Storm play out of the Thunderdome, as it was called when the Lightning played there. We ultimately lost both those teams to Tampa, and they left St. Pete. What I'm talking about rushed is, we look towards what we're doing right now, and if you followed the headlines, myself, a number of the other council members have kind of been at odds with administration over the vision for that site. So, the mayor has tried to move forward as his tenure in office ends. And a lot of us on council have kind of taken the approach of let's take a step back and look at things, because it feels like we're rushing a vision with no plan. And, a vision with no plan, that's a dream. And it's good to have dreams. I think we all have aspirational hopes for that site. And we put a lot of those aspirations of what we can be and what our city can be, and fulfilling promises on that site. But we also have to make sure that our dreams and our aspirations are grounded in reality. And that's why I really think that we need to take a step back and look at working with, or at least gain some kind of clarity, with the Tampa Bay Rays before we move forward much further on a path that, cannot be unwound when it comes to the redevelopment of the site.
And that's a good segue into the next section. So let's sort of give us an overview of the current wranglings.
Right. So where we're at right now in council is the mayor has narrowed his selections down to 2 finalists for the redevelopment. I am of the opinion that this should wait until next calendar year. And I would like to see not only more public engagement, but some kind of clarity on what the Rays are doing. Now make no mistake, I don't think that we should, give away everything to the Rays just to keep them here. But at the same time, what is my goal, right? What is my objective? I like baseball, sure, but I don't own the Rays. I have a position right now in the city council, and I'm running to be mayor. So my only goal is making sure that taxpayers and the civic interest and the best interest of our city is protected with the redevelopment of the site. So what I'm thinking in my head is, if you have a new stadium site that's done on the east end of the Tropicana Field's current site, it'll be a catalyst for development. So we keep talking about affordable housing, or housing that's affordable, market rate housing, and saying that those are 2 competing interests. And I think that's a dangerous approach. There's no reason you have to have only affordable housing or only luxury condos. If you only have affordable housing, that's called a housing project. If you only have luxury condos, that's called gentrification. I want to have this cool coexistence between different segments of our community that we can put together, because we do have such a large parcel. So I'd like to see the stadium as a catalyst for development with market rate condo, subsidized apartments. We can have jobs created. I would really like to have a convention center and hopefully hotel space, because if you followed at all our economy in St. Pete over the last 10, 15 years, we've been in a historic over 90% occupancy nightly for our hotels. I mean, there's been an incredible amount of demand. Sadly, COVID changed the financing metrics for people trying to get hotel financing. So a lot of the hotel projects that had been announced were scrapped. So I hope to attract more hotels as well. But one thing I think is really important too, that I've been mentioning for a year and a half, is the Rays, I'm sure shrewdly, because they know what they're doing, bought the Rowdies a few years back, the minor league soccer team. And if we have a redevelopment of Tropicana Field and a new stadium built for the Rays, they have committed that they're willing to consolidate their holding at Al Lang with the Rowdies and the Rays both under one roof. That would free up the Al Lang site, which is another 10 to 13 acres. So you take an 86-acre redevelopment and you can turn it to a 9,900-acre development. And, we can turn that into parkland, maybe museum space for our world-class museums along the waterfront. The options are endless. So it's really a good consolidation, economy of scale there. And hopefully we can attract lots of tech, jobs, affordable housing, market rate housing, a whole subsegment of our community into a new reimagined Tropicana Field site.
And so you mentioned a couple of times understanding where the Rays stand. Can you give us your best insight as to the communication between the Rays and the mayor, and sort of what the state of that relationship is, and again, an overview.
Right. And I don't want to speak for anybody else, but my understanding is that the Rays and the mayor are not currently talking. that was mentioned last week at council, is that there's just the communication is completely broken down. After the press conference, 4 or 5 months ago, where the mayor was, in front of the stadium, kind of saying the Rays were asking for a terrible deal he could never work with, communications fell apart. And, at the end of the day, personal vendettas, the ultimate loser is the residents of St. Petersburg. This team, this site, they matter to us. They're important to us. And it's the entire future of our city. And it's our chance to be a forward-thinking, progressive, thoughtful city, and really with meaningful, intentional redevelopment. So where I'm at is I do want to re-engage with the Rays. And if elected mayor, I will engage with the Rays day one as my first priority. I have a good working relationship with all of the executive leadership. I talk to members of the organization probably once a week. And it's not even about so much always being on the same page, but it's about respecting your business partner and your community partner enough that you are willing to continue a relationship for the sake of the community. I don't think everything the Rays have ever done is great, but they have made good faith efforts to be good partners, and we owe it to our citizens to return that. So, and again, what I'd like to see is I'd like to further vet their idea of a split season plan, and also of giving them a new stadium site on the east end of the current stadium site, because, make no mistake, they do have 50% of the development rights through the 2027 season. So as much as we talk about Tropicana Field, we can't do almost anything without them for the next 6 years unless we come to some kind of agreement in the interim. And I would like to come to that agreement, and I think I'm the guy to do that.
And you? So if elected mayor, then looking to the future, what is the North Star that you would propose that we all march towards?
I really think a smaller stadium on the east end of the site with redevelopment around it as the catalyst for redevelopment. I do not want to give general fund money to a new stadium. We've seen how that's worked in towns such as Miami. I'd like to see some land given in lieu of payment to the Rays. Now, the mayor originally said that they wanted 50 acres. I publicly said in an interview that's not true. They were asking for something more like 32, 33 acres. The mayor has now amended his comments. So, I've had intimate discussions with the Rays about what their plan is. And, if we could give them land in lieu of payment, it's not the worst idea in the world, seeing as our appraisals from the city's development department have the entire 86-acre parcel being worth between 47 million on the low end and 279 million on the high end for all 86 acres. So if we're going to get a credit for 200 million for a 19-acre parcel with a 13-acre then stadium, I mean, that's a really good arbitrage. That's a really good value for the taxpayers. So I think that could be a really good deal and a good starting line negotiation from where to go from. That being said, 2027 is a long ways off, but it's also not that far off. So if we don't have an agreement, in principle, at least within the first year of my tenure in office, I think we're just going to have to scrap the plans for now and look towards redeveloping things in 2028 with 100% of the redevelopment rights in our favor, and the ball will be in our court again.
Thank you. And you mentioned the appraisal, and it's quite a wide range, and at the low end seems pretty low. When you compare that to recent sales in the area and around in that same market, that same sort of area, what acres are going for. If you multiply what those acres have sold for times the number of acres at the Trop site, you get a number that's much higher than even the top end of that range. So, can you give us your perspective on that, the general value of the Trop land, and how it connects to that appraisal?
Right. So, that's what I think is just one sidebar is I think that's part of the value that I bring to the table as a candidate is I've been intimately involved in these talks and negotiations as a council member for 2 years now. So I know what's going on the inside, but also I do have real estate experience. So I kind of know something about valuation. So it's not just talk. It's really based in a foundation of history and respect for our past, but also common sense when I talk about a redevelopment plan. So what we have is we have 3 different appraisals. And what they were done in 2 ways: value without a stadium and value with a stadium. So the $47 million appraisal was the lowest appraisal value with the stadium currently because there's a cost to demolish it, environmental, cleanup cost, whatever. The 279 was the very high end with a clean site without a stadium right now with the Tropicana Field demolished. So I agree. There's a huge range there, and none of them seem to be what you would assume market rate would be. Now, of course, there is going to be a range of values. The farther east you are, you assume a higher value. The farther north, closer to Central Avenue, you'd assume it'd be a higher value as well. But at the same time, that's part of the issue with the way our government is structured. It's not an issue, but it's kind of where I'm at is you are beholden to the appraisals that administration provides. And administration and mayoral administration, what the function and the way the government works is the mayor brings a plan to council and council either accepts or rejects it. We can make some tweaks, but ultimately it's the mayor's plan, it's the mayor's prerogative, and he drives the car. So these are appraisals that we acquired from different accredited firms. But I think on the open market, yes, you could do much better on that land, as we've seen with projects in Tampa and other places, and even redevelopment sites in St. Pete. I mean, the per acre price on some of these new condo pads downtown has been astronomically higher than that.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Robert Blackmon, thanks for joining us in the Catalyst studio on My Mayor. See you again in a couple weeks.
Thank you very much for having me as always. Always enjoy the time here.